I'll try to roll with as fast as I can do, but this is, roughly a 35 to 45 minute presentation, and I was allocated an hour. And I plan on taking all of it because, Adams Columbia, who I work for, we serve a lot of the campgrounds probably in the room, and I want to open up to questions. I don't know why people were standing with tomatoes out in the lobby waiting to come in, Mr. Henry, but no, this is an open discussion. Don't feel like it's not. But with that, my name is Patrick. I work for Adams Columbia Electric Cooperative. We are pretty much a 12-county cooperative located in central Wisconsin. You can kind of see, I'm not sure which one's the pointer. Whoa. We serve all the way down into Dane County. You see a lot of spots on the map, So there's spots where we may be joined with Alliant. There could be spots where we overlap with WPS, We Energies. But pretty much what we serve is the rural parts of central Wisconsin. That's the best way to consider. We have just roughly 31,000 members, roughly 37,000 meters, and collective. We're half seasonal, and the rest is kind of a combination of residential and small commercial. So our topics today, and I know like it says on your brochure, demand. Now, demand is it's an animal that's hard to explain. So my goal when you guys leave this room is not just understand demand, but understand other topics we talk about. I know when I approach campgrounds with my engineer or my staker, we throw out, so many acronyms and terms and this, that, and the other thing, and who we work, and there's sometimes glass-eyed and sometimes, I get that, but I want to make sure we kind of know everything. So terminology, metering, service size, that's another big question, the laws and the codes that both you guys and us we have to follow. We'll go over rates, and I know that's a topic everyone wants to know about. Saving energy, and the last thing I'm going to talk about a lot is safety. For the co-op, I work with campgrounds. I work with commercial services, but I also do our safety program. And right now, I drove in this morning, it was foggy. I usually start with a safety message, before I kind of get in meat and potatoes of it. And it is, hey, if you're driving and you have automatic headlights, still click them to on. That's something that a lot of people don't consider. They're like, hey, I have automatic headlights. They don't register in fog. It's actually dark. So just something that's considering. So with that, now it's energy, it's CT, Gert's current transformer. But I can tell you, we throw every acronym from demand to kilowatt hours to KW. What's a secondary? We sell service. Now, I'm going to stop there and just kind of briefly walk through what I'm talking about. KWH energy, that's what in your house, that's how you pay a bill, straight energy. KWH. KW, well, that's demand. And I wish I knew what one's my little pointer. Secondaries, that's what runs from a transformer to the meter. Inspection, depending on where you are, we do require inspection prior to us, servicing it. CT is a current transformer. Does anyone have a CT service at their place? Perfect. So that pretty much means that meter is not a disconnect. So if you ever had a fire, for example, and they need to come and pull that meter, you still have energy running to that service. CT just has little wires going to your meter, and it actually has CTs or current transformers inside a box. There's a mixture of who owns that, not, but it's a service that we have. Application for us, it's always important. Easements, whenever we plow in across anybody's land, we require an easement. Easement, of course, is we have the right to be, within a 10-foot corridor, but of course, we're plowing in, we're going to be 48 inches underneath that. It allows us to maintain our lines, repair if there's any damages, but it's a very hot topic for a lot of people. Rates we'll talk about. I think most people are going to be single phase. And I have a lot of people ask, well, can I be three phase? Well, that depends on what your load is. That depends on what equipment you have in your building. But 99% of my campgrounds, single phase is what I'm going to recommend, or what applies. What's that?
I'm the oddball.
Yeah, you are an oddball. But also, your campground, we sometimes have three-phase run into a campground, which allows us then to split load. There's other campgrounds that have three-phase run into there. as you start to grow, single phase usually can handle a lot of the load in there, but there is a threshold. And that threshold is where we start to diversify our lines going in. So we'll bring three phase in, and then we'll split load off. It allows us to make sure that we want to make sure you guys are always in power. That's what's important to us, really. It's reliability. And I'll walk in front of this dozens of times. When you're calling for disconnects, of course, no one likes to see facility charge. Facility charge that's the Adams Columbia. That's a cooperative thing. People call it member charge. It could be meter charge. But that's a base rate on electric bill, right? So if you never use energy, you still have facility charge. For residential, for us, it's $1 a day. But it goes up from there. Our large powers, it's thousands and thousands of dollars. It pretty much directly relates to how much facilities you have at your place. When I say facilities, that means transformers, meters, wire in the ground, things that have to stay there for us to maintain so we can read your meters, we can bill you. Fun stuff. Our transformers, we talk about current, primary, and I can talk about a lot of things. So, and we'll kind of walk through them, but really the biggest thing that I know a lot of you guys will know is explain demand. I mean, that's what it says in the thing. So remember, so energy, that's measured in kilowatt hours and represents the amount of electricity consumed over time, like on a monthly bill. Everyone pays kilowatt hours. Now, demand is measured in kW and represents the rate of which energy is consumed. In this case, and how it works, pretty much, it's a code. It's measured in 15-minute intervals. Yes, sir?
Is that regardless of what power company it is? We energies, they're all the same with the demand?
It's still called kW, and it's still called demand. Yep.
But is the demand measured in 15-minute intervals?
Yes.
With all of them?
Yep. It's a metering.
Okay.
Now, they may bill you hourly, but that's where it's always kind of confusing. Demand is measured in 15-minute intervals. So we bill you in hours. It's kilowatt hours or it's max kW. So if you have a kW running over the same kW running the whole hour, a 10 kW, that's 10. But if only 5 kW is running over like 15 minutes and then the rest it's off, it won't be 10. It's an average of those 15 minutes in an hour. So it's really 15 minutes averaged. We bill you the maximum kind of the hour period. That makes sense? And like I said, if it ever doesn't, please raise your hand and I'd gladly try to explain better because it's tough. I can understand.
Why do you have that if you're already paying for kilowatts?
Why do you have demand?
It's the same as your kilowatts, is it?
No, kilowatt hours is energy. So that's kW is directly capacity. It's how big you are. That's why in residential, they're not as big as a commercial place. Also, when you look at the rate, and there is, the rate sheets I put on, do you guys have rate sheets on the table? You can see and we'll work that kind of later on. Energy itself, when we start to get demand billed, energy is much lower because there's demand component in there, there's a kW in there. In residential, it's all kind of blended together. Back in, I'd say probably 2016, 2015, it was really cool to unbundle rates. That's what it's called. It was take a residential facility charge and energy charge, which is kilowatt hours, and say how much goes to demand. Because there is demand in there, it's hidden. We don't break it out. How much is energy? How much goes to something else? Rate unbundling is cool. But KW, there is and I'll kind of work with why it can be beneficial to you guys as well. So here's my way I always like to explain KW. Right now, I'm a speaker in this room. And I'm going to get billed by how many people I have in this room at one time. Right? So I need a capacity. That's what it says outside the room, how much capacity this room has. But they're going to bill me how many I've put in here. So there's nothing to remember. I need to allow everyone access to the room. I need to make sure everyone gets that power or gets that availability. So really, a couple ways you can look at it. I can do it like right now, where they're going to bill me times 30. But there's other ways of doing it, actually. If everyone came in one at a time, and I just taught, Mr. Tracy, whoever, right? They're going to bill me one. Because the capacity I needed was only one. But you can do it a group where I only had maybe 5. My capacity is 5. That's demand. So pretty much it's how much capacity you need, and it's maximum. Because I don't know how many people are going to come in this room, right? I could have 5 in here, I could have had 50 in here, I could have 500. Well, I'm pretty sure everyone likes to hear about power and electricity. I'm going to make sure I build this, or I have the capacity, or Waco gave me a room big enough that it could hold, 50. Now, it's always going to be that same size, and that's demand on anything. So, like for a service, that's how best to look at demand. Now, energy, that's just how long you guys are in here, right? Has nothing to do with how many people are in here. It just matters how long you're in here. Energy is measured over time. Demand is just the maximum you need at any one time. Right now, I need a room for 30, right? That's capacity. And that's how the other word that you'll throw out there, demand, KW, and capacity are all kind of, they all mean the same thing. Does it make sense for demand demand's tough. Perfect. And we'll talk more about demand when we get into rates. But terminology also, we talk about transformer. We measure those in kVA. And this is directly related to the size of your connected load. A lot of times we'll have a campground ask, well, how big a transformer are you going to set there? And we ask the question, well, what are you going to connect to it? So we size the transformer based upon whatever you say you're going to put in, whether it be, 6 disconnects, all 50 amp sites, or 4 and 30 amp sites. If you say this is how much load I'm going to have, that's when we're going to size our transformer. And remember, the transformer never dictates what your load is necessarily, and never dictates what your rate is. So just kind of always, they're all separate. That's the best way when you look at your electric bill. Transformer, if I have a big transformer, that doesn't mean you're always a commercial business. You could be a residential, all electric house. So never kind of equate the two the same. Service, we measure these in amps, of course. So 400 amp service, 600 amp service. Residential is typically a 200 amp service. Now most campgrounds they're isolated 320s, 400 amp, 600 amp. After 600 amp, you start to get a pretty large services that, in my opinion, probably don't belong in a campground. There's other ways of doing it. It depends on what it is. There are some services that I do dictate, but that's a big service. Voltage, for the most part, let us worry about that. Unless you have some 3-phase service, where you need a different voltage, it's 120, 240, and then phases. Now, yeah, there are some people who have 3-phase run into their property, but their services are going to be single phase. Now, you may have 3-phase availability, which is important because if you were to build a shop and you want to have equipment that needs 3-phase, remember, it's whatever devices you have. I wish I knew the thing. Devices are what kind of dictates your phase. So I know it's very popular. People say, I have a pool. I have a pool pump. And that pool pump, it should be 3-phase. No, there's a threshold. Actually, it's really around 10 horse. So 10 horse or larger probably should be a 3-phase service. 10 horse and under probably should be a single phase. So there's a lot of reasons for that. It's, if you had a 20 horse single phase motor, that's very expensive and very big. If I have a 3-phase 20 horse motor, it's smaller, because the wires can be smaller, and they're a little cheaper. So there's definitely a threshold kind of what that voltage and phase kind of correlates to. And we're going to move on to metering. Like I said, and this is definitely open to any questions you guys come up. We'll have types of metering and ownership of meter. It's important because how many still have things like this in their campground? Who owns that meter? Yeah, you guys do. So how many high bills do you guys get a year? Same as us. It's, meters within the campground, especially new campground owners, I can tell you, they walk in and they assume every one of those meters belongs to the utility because it's a meter, right? Nope, the reality is there's a lot of, seasonal sites that still have the old ticker dial. And they're slowly transitioning. There is availability to get digital meters now. You can't get them from the utility. What we do with ours, we actually usually send them overseas. There's cooperatives all over the world. So we try to send them out and utilize them in underdeveloped areas. But So is this a 4.5 or a 4.6? What is it? I'm not sure what that really is. And
3.48.
is it? Is that what 4.48? Boy, if I'm the camper, I'm going to say it's 4.42. But that's just it. It's, the accuracy of those they don't exist. And you're trying to prove that your rate is appropriate, or you're billing them, it's nice to have a digital meter. So that's really tiny. We are now deploying, so how many people here are actually RM's Columbia campgrounds? Okay, great. So and there are other entities, other companies doing this. We're deploying Landis & Gyr meters starting Monday. It's about a 3-year rollout. What that means ultimately, and we do remote read now, but now it's going to be RF. You'll see a lot of those companies, a lot of power companies are going to RF metering. We currently read ours by Powerline Carrier. Yeah, so the same wire we feed your place, that's how we read. It's frequencies. Now we're going to actually store via an MDM, which is important for all you guys. MDM is available by most power companies. It's meter data management. So if you want to find out how much KW you used during Memorial Day weekend, how much energy maybe you used over Memorial Day weekend, you can log into the MDM on your own and look. Now, yes, some of you guys have me, another representative possibly, but it's important because you can kind of real-time track. Now, that meter is talking to other meters. That's kind of cool about RF. So instead of using the power line, they just talk to each other and they create a big spider web. And that's how it sends information back to our co-op. So, it's a neat process that we'll have, and we'll have it for all of our region within the next 2.5, 3 years. That's the online portal. They're always rated to a service size, and there's kind of internal digital self-checking. So all those little zeros, on a digital readout, there's 8 available spots. They all mean something on a 0. So we know if there's something wrong with that meter. It knows. It notifies the service.
I was just gonna ask because we've had our power go out, and you know where we're at. We've had our power go out there.
Yep.
And we've had to call you, and you guys had no clue.
No clue.
Now with this, if our power goes out.
We are notified. Yep. Yeah, right now it's, the smart grid, right? I think a lot of people have heard of the terminology smart grid. It's definitely right now a very dumb grid. We don't know. We don't know whether service went out. It still there's no automatic switching. It's for safety. That's the biggest thing, is we don't want to have things that automatically restore power because we don't know what the power outage was due to. But it's nice if just the meter could tell us I'm out of power. That's great. We don't want a transformer tell us it's out of power or a switch point tell us it's out of power, because it could be a carpool accident, it could be someone touched it, we don't know. And we don't want to re-energize and cause a problem. But meters themselves, we want them to communicate with us. But also when I said it's rated to the service size, it's not uncommon where we put a standard 200 class meter in, and there's a 400 amp service, and maybe a 75 kVA transformer. That's a typical kind of look to a lot of services. And during Memorial Day weekend, you heat that transformer up, because they can usually they can get bigger than 75 kVA. That's not their max. They can, that's a wire. The service itself, that probably was hot. I know a lot of people put an ice bag on top. Never a good idea. We know there's a problem, right? But the meter inside that pedestal, that has a certain rating on it. So what a lot of times will happen before you maybe fail the rest, you will actually fail your meter. And that's where it becomes a problem. That's where we know that 400 amp service is not big enough. But remember, they're always rated to service size, so not just because it's a meter doesn't mean it's unlimited numbers. Nope. It still has a rating for how many amps can go through it. Yes, sir.
The CT cabinet, that would not apply to that.
CT would not. No.
The load's not passing through it.
Yeah, on a 400 amp, yeah. If you had a 400 amp CT cabinet, correct. The load's not passing through your meter. There are little wires leading into it. 320s, and you could have, it depends on if it's CT metered or not. Remember I said that's not disconnect? You wouldn't have a problem typically with overrunning a meter in a CT setup. Mr. Button. And here's where I always, we kind of talk with you guys is, well, who owns these? We don't have any more of these. They're definitely belong to you guys. They're mechanical typically. Resale is prohibited. Testing is complicated. That's where it generates complaints. Replacement stinks. And demarcation. Now, demarcation is the point in time where one entity ends and one entity starts. That's really the terminology demarcation. So in a meter situation, not in a CT cabinet, but in a typical 200 amp service, our power runs out, ends at the meter, then the member's power starts, runs from there. In the CT service, they run into the cabinet. We still place our equipment inside the cabinet, but it's a service disconnect. That's a point in time of demarcation. So just so we know, it's, and when I say generates complaints, it happens. And it's not easy to test. What I recommend is if you are testing, using something that's a known, KW. And you can calculate how many KW run over time. A hair dryer. That's how we test, actually. It's portable, so we plug it in, we let it run for, sometimes up an hour. We can say, on the back there's a little nameplate that says how many watts it is, how many volts it is, and then we can use Schneider's Ohm's law to say, this is how many kilowatt hours that it should tick around that little dial. Or on a digital, this is how many it should go forward. It helps alleviate a lot of those complaints if you use something like a hair dryer. You can walk around the campground and use it. Now, running a little hair dryer for an hour isn't the most exciting thing to do in the world, but it does help with decreasing those complaints. Now, resale, we'll kind of walk through that later. You can charge for what energy they use. That is not against the law. But you cannot make a profit. You cannot resell it. If we charge 11.2 cents, or whatever it says on the little snazzy sheet, you can charge that plus a rolled-in facility charge. You can have a true cost as long as you are not making a profit on the energy. Yeah, I love this. Hopefully I cannot see how old I am.
Can you trade one meter out for another? Can you trade the digital
God.
out for one of these circle ones?
I was supposed to do it different. You can. And that's not going to work. So we're not going to even do that. So
So now with the facility charge, I had a hard time breaking that out because some of the power sources for a campground and some of it for seasonal sites and some of it for daily sites. How do I get an accurate facility?
no, great point. I gotta turn that thing off quick. Hold on. What is on? Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so facility charge, when you're trying to look at, taking a cost and saying this is how much to be spread. Well, you have 75 seasonal sites. It depends where you're spreading that facility charge over. And it's all in cost. So this meter associated with this area campsites, we get billed, it's $1 a day. And then this facility charge, it might be $65 represents these campsites. So we know we can take the energy that goes to that, plus the facility charge, divided by how many services are in there, and that's what we can distribute amongst them. And you can use taxes and all the fun stuff too, but associate them with the class that it represents. So for seasonals, that's the most common. There's a meter usually that serves that group. It may serve another group, so you have to we're going to cut out 4, so it's only divided by 10 if it's true seasonals, but it's important. Resale, now, how do you prove it? Well, if someone gets mad enough and calls up the power company or the PSC and says, hey, this campground is charging me 15 cents a kilowatt hour, then there's we look into it. But it's always important just to kind of make sure you know how to spread that cost. Facility charge, knowing what facility charge is associated with that meter, with that area, and divide it equally.
So my favorite topic, the demand charge, is how do you share that with your seasonals?
Yeah, I would do, so we know it's max per month. I'm not sure if do you bill monthly to them, weekly, daily, yearly, annually?
Like every 60 days.
Every 60 days?
Summer.
So you guys, for people who are demand for us, it's maximum for that month. So you'd have to I would break it down into a day. So we know if you got to 60, that's, it's 2 per day over a month, and divide that then with them. It's a true number. So we know it's 10,000 kilowatt hours represents this much cost in energy. We know KW cost plus facility divided by how many seasonals. That's how I would do it. I would just truly represent it as a KW times 19 for you. And that's what's nice. I kind of have our rate slide later, and that's where we can talk a lot about rates are important. Now service size, new services they're common in campgrounds. That's probably a good portion of my spring work. It's either irrigation or new services for campgrounds, or expansion, or for you guys even look into areas where you want to, meet new code. The NEC code changed in 2017 as far as volt drop. I'm not sure if you're putting new services in or you're upgrading parts of your park. Then we would have to be involved with either a disconnect or adding transformers, which is a new service. Now remember, whenever you're growing, it's different than just fixing. Whenever you're growing in the campground, call your power company first. Versus fixing, it could be call your electrician first. So, voltage, like we said, it's going to be 120, 240. That's your services typically. There are some that are 208. There's some might be something else, but amperage, we can base upon what it is, phase of construction. So our typical voltages, now this is Adams Columbia, this is most of Wisconsin. Like I said, single phase are always going to be 120, 240 or 240, 480. Our three-phase services are always going to be either 120, 208 or 277, 480. Always. We don't really have other voltages. Now, how do you know what voltage you need? Like, remember we talked about that's whatever load is connected to that. Does a camper need 277, 480 three-phase? No. Does your pool need 277, 480? Probably not. But just it's important to know what phase, how much power we're needing. Look on the back of whatever device you have. If it's a motor, there's a tag. I need this voltage. It's a range typically. And knowing those tags, this applies to your house. I told my friends, when you look to buy something, a TV at Best Buy, they think you're weird. Turn it around and look how much power it uses. Those new LED TVs, they are cool. They consume a lot of power. It's good. It helps your bill, for sure. Because, this guy, that's what services started with. And then it went to, of course, they upgraded to something bigger. And then they upgraded to something bigger. And then they upgraded to something bigger. Now, do all of them, they all need the same voltage? Yep. All the same amperage? They don't all use the same amperage, but is your service the same? It does. It is. It's the same for probably all of those. That's where now it depends how many disconnects you could have for that service, but your service is still the same. Does that make sense? So if I have a camper, because you don't know who's going to show up. That's really when you look through this, you have no idea whether it's going to be a pop-up that shows up or a Class A. We don't know. You don't know what's going to come in the door. You don't know for non-seasonal sites who's pulling in. That's you got to assume. Yeah, you build church for Easter Sunday, and I'm sorry I'm going to steal it. But it is. You have to build your stuff, understanding you don't know who's going to come through that door, and we don't know it either. So we plan full capacity. We know you're going to fill up use as much energy as you can, and if for you guys, if you're metering, you hope they use as much energy as they can because they're happy, but the service is still the service. So this is a typical 400 amp CT service. Middle button. So this is common in many campgrounds. So I like to kind of see when I talk about CT service what that really means. So what this represents is a backboard. You'll see these sitting, the transformer will be sitting over here. Our transformer is up to it's a service disconnect, and these are the CTs, and this is the meter. So you see, our wires never actually go to the meter. They have little wires that go through. That's just that because they go through the CTs. But this is this is 6 feet by it's 3 feet off the ground, 6 feet by 4 feet. That's a big structure. So when you're planning for service size, and I'm sorry if I'm in you guys' way, just kick me or something. you got to plan for that size. Now remember, there's also a tub or a transformer, and that's pretty big. So having them located in an appropriate area that's just as key as sizing your service. And I'll show you why in a little bit. But when you start to look at cabinetry, who owns that? So guess what we own? Little CTs and that meter. The rest belongs to you guys. So when you start to look at equipment failure or equipment pricing, I need to put in a cabinet. That's a little more expensive than a 320 or 200 amp pedestal. But just so you know, when you're looking at services, we pay, that's what we put in, and we put those in. The rest of it belongs to you. Now, this device right here is a cabinet. A lockable cabinet that we can get into is actually not something you guys can get into. So yes, you buy equipment for us to put stuff in. And that's the same with kind of how a meter works. But, there is other options than 400 amp service. 320 looks just on it's a pedestal. A lot of people have pedestals on their home. We could put a 320 amp meter in there. Now, is 320 400 amp? Who has a 320 service? Anybody in this room? Yeah, you have a bunch of them. Well, when you get them from whoever, is that a 400 amp service? Even though on the breakers, it says 200 and 200.
You get 80%.
Thank you. It's 80%. So if you're on Alliance lines, they actually require you to take out one of those breakers. You can't have two 200s. They require you to take it out. So you can't exceed because the metering can't get that high either. So it's an assumption that you're not going to push the threshold of 400 amp services because 400 amp is this. 320 is not 400. It's an 80% rule. Yes, sir.
Does Adams Columbia allow you to use, for example, on a 400 or 600, I was allowed with We Energies to just put my 200 amps back to back or whatever with that, and that was considered the mains. Even though there are multiple mains, they did not require me to have a main disconnect. You allow that?
We can, yeah.
You do? Okay.
Yeah, our big thing it's our main disconnect is still whatever you guys have. Because there's actually still a point of disconnect.
I meant a mechanical.
In your mechanical arm, though. That's it. As long as it's open air, they're going to probably lock it. Who locked your...
No, do you require it?
We will then, yeah.
You do?
Yeah, then we will.
Put in, they said the main breakers and the panels on that structure is enough.
Yeah, we require a service disconnect.
You do?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, anything larger than 400.
I'll talk to you afterwards, because I'm thinking about
Whoa.
our shower building.
Yeah?
We've got a panel in there, 400 amp breaker,
Yeah, with you have 400 amp breaker?
400 main in there,
Yeah. Yep.
okay? It's not a CT.
That's old. So and that's code too, and that's something we'll have to talk about after. You're right. So this is what a 3-phase one would look like. So you have, of course, neutral, 2 wires, neutral, 3 wires. So that's really the easiest way to look at 3-phase. We bring 3-phase in. We don't run all wires to new services. We just run, wires to, phases. Single phase runs to your service, 3-phase runs to a point. But it's the same thing. So even though it's a 3-phase service, there's a much bigger tub right here, which, you've seen probably one by your place. It's a much bigger tub. This is a much bigger backboard. And once again, you have to put that in the right place, and we size that equipment. And I kind of regret putting this in red, but what code do you guys, Mr. Button, what code do you have to abide by at your campground for electricity? What code? What electric code? You're the NEC, right? Yeah. That's why I picked it here because I'm pretty sure you know it. But so when NEC is your side of the service. So when you're looking at the pedestals, that's the NEC. When you're looking at the cabinetry, that's the NEC. Who's the utility service rep here? Yeah. Oh, no, in the room. Utility supply. Wade? Yes. Right? Those are things you buy from him that he has to meet the NEC code. So yeah, I know what the NEC code is because I work with services, but we don't. We actually do the NESC code. So even though we work with electricity, even though we're on a site, we are two totally different codes. And why does that matter? Well, because when our staker comes out, or any staker comes out to help you with a new service or a disconnect or anything like that, they don't know this. They have no idea how many service disconnects you need. They're not calculating your load drop, your voltage drop. They're not calculating anything. We base our service based upon what you tell us. That's the biggest thing. We don't know, we know NEC, but we can't guide you on that because it's your side of the meter. That's that line of demarcation where our stuff ends, your stuff begins, and that's why it's important. Now, NESC, that's where it dictates the size of the wire we're putting in, all that stuff. Our runs for our voltage drop, we have the same thing, but just on a different level. So it's really similar. And now we know the code did change in 2017, which does change a lot of new services for NEC. It's probably the most common question I get is, well, how many campsites can I put on this service? Well, it depends now on volt drop, right? It also depends on what rate you want to be on. If you want to put a wire in this big and run 350, 400 feet and have 20, 30, 40, 50 campers on 100 campers on it and pay a large facility charge, and you can do that. Designing new service areas or upgrading service areas, we can always add transformers, any utility can. They can always add services, other utilities can. That's why it's important sometimes to diversify your risk with those services. So here's that law. We talked briefly about it. When you have to have a meter that represents, that is a utility meter. So a point in time when, if it's you do have a mobile home park. If you have a mobile home park that's non-transient, which means they're staying there for a good portion of the year. There's cooking facilities, bathroom facilities. It's a mobile home, manufactured home. The law states that must be metered by us, not by anybody else. So that is, if it is a mobile home, individual electric meter is required for non-transient multifamily dwelling residential buildings, multifamily, mobile home parks, and for commercial. That's the law. So for Adams Columbia, that's the thing. If it's a mobile home, and it's not talking a seasonal place with wheels. We're not talking about a seasonal campsite. That's where it's kind of dicey. But a lot of campgrounds do have mobile home parks associated with them that have their own meters. So if you have multiple mobile homes, they can't have one meter like you do with your campsites. They each have to have a meter. So if you're planning on a mobile home park addition to your campground, just assume you're going to have that. Yes, sir.
You have to have a meter owned by you.
Correct, owned by us. Yep, has to be utility meter. And that's just always been that way. It's whenever there's like I said, it's multifamily or mobile home park. Now it does, if you read further in here, it does exclude campgrounds, but campgrounds and mobile home parks do exist together. It's dangerous. I always tell you, if it's a mobile home park, have a point in time where this is the mobile home park, this is the campground. Metering makes a big difference in there. So when we talk about resale of energy, this is what Adams Columbia puts in it. This is what Alliant does. So it pretty much says you can't resell it. But we all know you can charge them. You just can't make a profit on it. And I know it's dangerous, and how do you do it correctly? Take true costs, all in, divide by how many people that's serving. That's how you do it. It might not be the most advantageous number for you guys in the world. I don't know, off the top of my head how many sites it serves, but it's a way of diversifying that cost over people who use it. Now, the other thing to consider on that is our rates every year, one rate class may subsidize another rate class. What that means is this rate class, maybe the irrigation, made a lot of money this year because it was a really dry year and a lot of them ran. Well, maybe the residential, everyone was conserving energy. It wasn't a hot year, so no air conditioners running. They used very little. We still had to pay people, so that rate class subsidized. The irrigation made more money, it subsidizes. So when you guys judge that, you can spread the cost over more part of the year, or other sites can subsidize the other sites. Just a tactic to try to diversify that cost over more than just, because it could be higher on 10 sites. That's horrible. That means I need to have a sheet. Can I borrow? Oh, yeah, Henry, I'm gonna have yours. I'll grab one of these. Okay. So, we have more on our website, but I'm just gonna walk through. This is, every power company has a tariff or a rate schedule or a rate sheet. And you guys should no doubt each have one of these sitting somewhere in your office. Because, and you see at the top, it does say this is effective until April 1, 2018. This is one I just pulled from my file. We have, and they change. So if you are on like a WE or Alliant Energy, they have to update these through the PSC, which means there's a process. They request to have an increase in their rates. For Adams Columbia or a cooperative, it's done through our board, typically around the the first of the year, and then we try to roll out rates around April. So you see most of them are going to say April-ish, April 1st, April 15th, May. That's when our new rates are kind of applicable. How we do ours is we hire a rate consultant. It's a third party, not interested in, of course, making money for Adams Columbia. They do a rate inquiry. So they go, it's a great rate study. It goes through each rate class, how many people are in each class, how much money they made, and how much we had to pay to have those facilities there. So how much did it take for billing? How much did it take to, how many transformers we're changing out? What it take to keep that class where it is. And classes, each kind of highlighted section. And that's how we adjust rates ultimately. It's a mixture of numbers and art, because you gotta kind of balance. Well, do we want to increase rates this year and anger our members, or do we want to increase rates a little bit more next year? Well, does a frog care if you boil it fast or slow? I love that analogy. They don't. And hopefully there's no frog lover, and I am a frog lover, yes, but or lobster. They don't care either, apparently. So residential facility charge. And we're going to kind of walk through if you're Adams Columbia, but you can read these on anyone's too. We call ours. This is Schedule GS, and a lot of rates for any utility will have a schedule, and it usually is just an acronym. And ours is GS, which is General Service. 21 is residential. 23 is business, and DF is dairy farm. So they all share the same rate class, and it's $1 per day. $1.08, 11.2 cents per kilowatt hour. These are still our rates right now. That's why they're not changed. And now these have to be under 40 kW. See a little, available to all single-phase, non-seasonal accounts requiring less than 40 kW of demand. For us, 40 kW is our magic number. Why? I haven't a clue. It was established a long time ago. 40 was, what I've been told is, that's about the time when residential ends and business begins. My house, I'm an all-electric house. I use 32 kW. I know it's big. It's got an electric boiler in it. So even if I went over 40, well, I can't go above. There's no other rate class for residential at this point, unless you're in time of day. So you notice that if you get down into a schedule NRM, which is more of the seasonals, it's the same cost. Yes, sir.
That's per meter, 40 kW per meter.
Correct. Yep, per service. Great point. Great point. Yeah, it's per service. So a service for a campground may represent a bunch of sites or a building in a bunch of sites. But yes, that is per meter. Great point.
Is the 40 kilowatt typical in the industry, or how does that compare to your?
So in the co-op world, it's typical. In Wisconsin, I've seen some that it's demand period. It doesn't matter if you are 10, 20, 30, or 40, or 50. I've seen 50 out there. 40 is, that's when the transformers change. So the largest residential one we have is a 37.5 kVA transformer. The next one's a 50. And it is more on the sizing of the transformers. So I'd say it's somewhat industry standard. But if you read through, we have a one-page sheet that covers almost all of our rates. It's not the same with a lot of utilities too. Yes, sir.
Now, what is 40 kilowatt, what does that cover? Is that like a typical 200 amp service?
No, a 40 is going to be typically a 320 or a 400. Now you can, remember I said the load, meter, the transporter doesn't care, the rate doesn't care necessarily right away, right? So my house, I'm at 32, and I have a 37.5 kVA transformer sitting there. Can I get over 40? I bet you if I add stuff to my shop, yeah, I can, for sure. Now I have a 37.5 kVA transformer, I'm over 40, well, that's the dumb part of, the grid. We don't necessarily know that right now. We can't monitor it.
Does the demand charge kick in on, say, a 200 amp service, or 2 or 4?
That's based upon if it's a business or if it's a residential, it won't.
Business.
It's a business. It could be a 200 amp or a 320 amp or a 400 amp. Any of them can have a 40 demand. Yep. I mean, if it depends on what's connected to it. If it's
No, I'm saying, when do you start charging for the demand?
like,
You go over 40.
and yeah, yep. So you're allowed to go over once within a 12-month period. So as soon as that service is turned on, ideally for you guys, you're operational. You're not paying for a service that's, ideally when you actually start using. Now facility charge excluded, but that demand itself. So during the summer, when you have 10 campers attached to that demand, that meter, they're all, they're aggregating to that demand being higher. Now in the middle of winter, they're not there. You won't have a demand cost anymore. It's only when you have a demand, you need to serve a capacity of people.
But when do your charges start kicking in? At what level? When do you start charging the demand charge?
I mean, whenever you go over 40. So,
40.
yep. Whenever you go over 40, and I mean, if you tell us you're a business. So if I put in a house, I go over 40, we're not going to charge you demand. Not at this point in our time. Jim?
But in the winter, if one seasonal came in, and turned on his lights, and ran 1 kilowatt, you'd pay 40 times that.
Or whatever that's.
Yeah, $20. Yeah, you pay.
It costs you a fortune. It's,
Whoa.
The problem is too, is it kicks in for the rest of the year.
Correct.
So if you hit Memorial Day like we did last year, where it was all your big units, hot weekend, and you hit the demand twice, you now have that $20 kilowatt hour for the rest of the year on top of what you use in addition to that.
So middle of winter, that's why it's a dangerous rate. In the middle of winter, when you have, ideally you're making no money, right? No one's coming through that door, nothing's going on, but you may be doing maintenance. We talked about that, is you may be going down there and you're running tools off those outlets. Those will be charged demand because it's based upon that meter. That meter says, I went over 40, I am now a demand meter. So that's how we bill it, that's how I meter it.
Something needs to change there.
So,
Especially with your smart meters now, you'll be able to monitor that stuff. 'Cause
Yep.
That's ridiculous. What
The-
you just said, that can happen if someone uses 1 kilowatt. That's
yeah,
crazy.
it is. That's why the rate it's very dangerous. For seasonality. In most commercial settings, you run all the time. In a business, you are open, hopefully 5 days a week, every day, every month, all year long, ideally. Campgrounds, it may change. But here's what a tactic I use with a lot of our campgrounds. Well, if 40 is the magic number, let's try to get below 40. And how do you do that? Well, you can't say we're not going to have these sites work. Remember, that's per meter. That's per site. You can put in 2 services. Now, I'd rather pay sometimes $1 a day. And yeah, it might sit there all month long, which you'll pay $30 to have it just sit there. But that is a way of diversifying your energy risk for services when it comes to demand. Now, of course, then it's a game. It's not an art. It's a science to a point. If you're at 60 kW on that service, should you put in just one service? Now you're at 30 each. What if 5 A classes come in? Now you have 2 services over 40 kW. Now we're in deep trouble. He's got worse than better. So ideally, if you're going to get into a strategy where you are putting in new services, trying to diversify, and also it makes a difference to your services with the new 2017 rule, how much volt drop it can be. If you have class 500 or class A sitting at 200 feet, 300 feet from your service, if that's not 350 MCM wire in the ground, you will have considerable volt drop. You will. Does it meet new code? No, it does not. But that's the thing. So you can put new services in to hopefully get below that 40 kW. Now, should campgrounds be on 40? I have to say this, and hopefully no one's going to throw eggs at me. I have to treat every member like they're the next member. So I have plenty of members in this room. I can't treat anyone different, and they share rate classes. So it's not campgrounds. Corn dryers. You guys, everyone knows what a corn dryer is. You know, those big bins sitting out there, they dry corn. How many months of the year do they run? One. And are they over 40 kW? Oh, Lord, yes. So are they ticked come January when they run a 5 kW fan just to get air through there? Oh, they're mad. They call up and but here's why. That's what energy does cost. In the middle of winter, that's what Adams Columbia gets billed from. We buy our power from Alliant. You know, there's the cost. A lot of co-ops do buy power from either Dairyland, Alliant. Theirs gonna be similar because we share costs. We buy wholesale. That's how energy is going now. We get energy and 2 different demand costs every month. I'm not going to charge 2 different demand costs for you guys. That's just ridiculous. But that's the industry going. Now, there are states, there are utilities that charge every class demand. But here's the thing, and we can kind of get to demand costs because that's, I know, a big.
Excuse me, just a minute.
Yeah.
What's the rationale with the power company? Is it just that you don't want to overload one service? Because if somebody goes and puts in another meter so he doesn't have the demand, he's going to probably be using more power. So
He could be.
What's the rationale?
Yeah, we don't.
I don't get it.
Yeah, well, the biggest thing is, so the rationale of putting in 2 services, I don't want to have a Memorial Day weekend where a campground owners call me going, I just burned up a service. I just burned up a transformer. Can it happen? Absolutely, it can happen. I can tell there are people in this room who saw it happen. The rationale for putting in services is, I don't want to have that. I want to make sure that the campground, anybody who's coming to a campground is happy. Services they put in 20 years ago, they're too small. I will be honest with you. We didn't know that. I mean, there are campers coming out with their 100 amp services. Can you fit 10 of them on a meter? No, you can't. We didn't know. There's a lot of 30 amp services. They can cheat and they'll bump. But that's the thing to consider is we do it. It's a strategy, number one, to get below. It's a billing strategy, but it's also a happy camper strategy. That's the rationale.
The rationale from us, from a common sense standpoint, is I think we can all get this says, okay, we arbitrarily picked 40 kilowatts to say, hey, this is a flag to say this meter's using too much power.
Yep.
But if that's one time over 365 days or 5 times over 365 days, and it doesn't reach to a point where it's a safety issue, I don't understand. I get the point of getting billed for those instances. Mm-hmm. I don't get the point for billing for the rest of the year. Right. And if you continue to go over 40, I also get the rationale that says, hey, you have to go out and split your services because you're unsafe.
Right. Those are, and I don't disagree with both of those. That's just the rate classes that we have available. There's no, and that's going to be common for most power companies. There's not, because there's lots of different businesses. If I own, it depends on what you are. If I'm a welding shop, I'm a campground, but there's other, like I said, through, grain dryers, there are many, many, many businesses out there that don't use power, that are what I call poor loads. They're a seasonal load. So we only serve that. We have all the facilities sitting in the ground that only can serve 4 months of the year. Or 1 month of the year for a corn dryer. That's not an ideal load for us. But we got to still recoup costs, and we're still paying on an energy cost. That's what the rate class they're in. Now, there's other things you can get out there. Like I said, 40 kW is what is a rate class. There's other things. If you can get below 40, you're not in that rate class anymore.
Do you start January over again?
It's a rolling 12 months. So really,
Yeah, but what, is it January to December, or what is your month?
So it could be a middle of June, and you went over 40, and then it's a rolling 12 months. Yep. So
That's what you're saying, if someone, the seasonal comes up and puts something on, if you're already in that 40.
You're already in 40, yep.
You're already there from Memorial Day or whatever.
Yep, you're going to pay it.
Then it continues through June.
So when
Yep.
you fire back up in April, you're back on demand charges until you prove
Correct.
on Memorial Day that you don't hit the 40 again.
Correct. It's a rolling 12 months. So we just
So
it's
it's really hard to get out, is what you're saying.
That's why, I mean, I can tell you the campgrounds in this room that we worked with, we worked very hard on trying to diversify risk. I'm gonna tell you, it's difficult. So the other things you can do, and I'll just quickly walk you through it. There is, time of day meters, which you can put in. A lot of campgrounds do time of day metering. So time of day, you can see on the far left side, our on peak, it's about 3/4 of the way down. Yeah, it's, our on peak May through October 1st, 1 p.m. to 8 p.m. But it's also Monday through Friday and excludes holidays. So I'm not saying time of day is always a good answer, but it is a possible rate class a service could be in. If you're under, that's when under 40. There's a 40 and over where you pay. So it's the general service. There's actually we have some. So it's the same thing as your demand. You have 2 different demand costs and 2 different energy costs. There's a lot of availability of rates. No, that's why I tell everybody, hey, get a rate sheet like this every year, see what rates they have. Because if I took this from 10 years ago, these rates are not the same. We used to incentivize people to use more energy. Where energy got cheaper, the more you used. That we will not do anymore. But everyone should have one of these because there are other rate classes you can take advantage of which keep your bill lower.
Can you help us, because you have our history.
Yep.
And those meters, when we were doing it.
Yep.
Can you help us do the analysis on a part-by-part basis to figure out whether it would save us money or not?
I sure can. Yep. Because remember, if you're, and just as a general, point, it's Monday through Friday, it excludes holidays. When you guys most busy? Weekends and holidays. A lot of times it does work.
But the on-peak
Is
is the 2 times
Yep.
normal, so that's why they do this.
Yeah, we work through it. Yeah, and there's sometimes it works. Usually how it ends up being, you save money during winter. You're not paying demand during like shoulder months. So spring and fall, you're really saving money. You're saving tons of money in winter, and you pay a little bit more in summer. But it saves money.
Is there a charge to change the meters then if you want
Nope.
to do that?
Nope. We just ask if it's a meter change, you're like, if you're under 40, we worked hard to get under 40. We'll look into it. We'll work hard on getting below, like metering. We'll change your rates and everything. But if you went over 40 next month, we're not going to run out and change your meter. It's meant to be you're allowed to go over once over a 12-month period, which hopefully Memorial Day weekend or Labor Day weekend, that's your one time. Remember, it's not every month. You're allowed to go over one time over that year. Now it's dangerous. I don't disagree. How am I doing for time? I have no idea.
10 minutes. You got a couple minutes.
Really? Crap. Okay, I'll hurry. So when I say it's all about the numbers, this is KW, this is energy at 11.2 cents. So if you're at 47 kW, you're paying $935 for that 47 kW. You use 14,000 kilowatt hours. That's additional money on that. So here's what it'd be. I compared these two. So that's 658 plus 935. That's demand. If it's at straight energy, that's what it's going to be. So 935 plus 658, it's actually not that much more than straight energy, believe it or not. So there is magic to the number. So I can say, hey, I'm going to be under 40 kW, right? But if you're using 14,000 kilowatt hours, that's kind of that magic number, 14 to 15, it's darn close to being the same cost. So make sure when you are thinking about changing your meter, changing your rate, or doing something, you are under that. So last two things. Business incentive program. Don't forget about your own buildings. We're so worried about our own other services, we never think about our own stuff. Focus on Energy has great incentives for VFDs, pool pumps, door, occupancy sensors, all these different things. You guys have a meter that you guys pay for your own stuff. Make sure you take care of those too. It's ways to save energy. You can get incentives to do it. Myself and a rep would come out, we'd walk through the parks, mainly your facilities, say here's incentives, here's how much you can get back. Last thing, I talk about safety. And I'm sorry, not a campground. This is what happens when you hit a transformer with a car. That's oil, that's fire. That never stops until the energy source is taken away. This is at a campground. You can see the winter, someone plowed into it. This is at a campground. This is where the switch point is. This is where the power is. And that's all I got. So, and I'd show you that, these are dangerous. So when you have big rigs, that are backing up, and you're plowing snow during the winter, please be cautious of these things. They have flags on them. Make sure it's, you guys take care. So with that, I would love to entertain any questions after this. Thank you, guys.